this is Miss Parody, and in this video I'm going to do one more example of direct variation. John's total earnings varies directly with time. He earns $446.50 in 19 hours. Determine an equation representing the situation, and then use the equation to determine the amount John would make if he worked 40 hours. Let's first start by picking out something that's very important that's stated in this question. It says that John's total earnings varies directly with time. So if we're going to make an equation, we know from our lesson from direct variation that the equation will have the form y equals mx, where the dependent variable is equal to some constant multiple of the independent variable. Let's let E represent the earnings and T represent the hours worked. Now we know that since John's total earnings varies directly with time, that total earnings is the dependent variable and time is the independent variable. So if we just change up the variables within our y equals mx to E equals mt, the equation better represents the situation. With that said, you still could use the equation with y and x as the variables. I just chose to use variables that better represented your question. So we have the equation that John's earnings are going to equal some multiple of time, which makes sense because his total earnings are going to be his wages times the number of hours he works. So we have to find a value for m, or the slope, constant of variation, whichever you want to call it. So to find m, or the constant of variation, since this is direct variation, we know that the earnings is a constant multiple of time. So we have our initial equation, E is equal to mt. Now the information given to us in the question says that he earns $446.50 in 19 hours. So in this one situation, when earnings is equal to $446.50, we know that time is equal to 19. So we substitute those two values into the equation, E equals 446.50 and T equals 19, and now we can solve for the constant of variation. Rearranging, we get that m is equal to 446.50 over 19. We get that m is equal to 23.50. So what this is saying is that the slope is 23.5, or that the rate of change is $23.50 per hour. So we say that the equation representing John's total earnings, E equals 23.50 T. So his earnings is going to be $23.50 times every hour he works. Now for part B, it says use the equation to determine the amount John would make if he worked 40 hours. We have the equation E equals 2350T. We want to know what his earnings were if he works for 40 hours. So, similar to the very last unit that we worked on, we can substitute the values into the equation. So we have 2350 times 40, once we sub T in for 40, and we get that his earnings is equal to 940. Therefore, we can say that John's total earnings would be $940 if he worked 40 hours. Sorry, that should say 40 hours.